Stop obeying. Inner Steel, full YouTube script. Target word count 5000 plus words. Stop. Before you read another word, answer this honestly. How much of your life today was actually chosen by you, and how much of it was simply obeyed? The alarm that someone else's schedule trained into your body. The opinions you hold because everyone around you holds them. The path you're walking because it was expected of you, approved of, never questioned. The version of yourself you perform every day, built not from your own values, but from a lifetime of quiet, invisible obedience to rules you never agreed to, voices you never chose to listen to, expectations you never actually examined. You have been obeying so long, you've mistaken it for who you are. The Stoics understood something that most people never confront in their entire lives. Obedience without examination is not virtue. It is surrender. And a man who has surrendered his mind to every voice except his own will never know what he was actually capable of. This is Inner Steel. And today, we're going to dismantle the invisible obedience running your life, one piece at a time. By the end of this video, you will see exactly what you've been obeying, why it has cost you more than you realize, and how to take your authority back. Let's begin. The soldier who followed orders into his own destruction. There's an account from military history of a soldier, disciplined, loyal, deeply respected by his unit, who received an order he privately knew was wrong. The terrain was unstable. The intelligence was outdated. Every instinct he had, sharpened by years of experience, told him the mission as planned would end in disaster. He raised his concerns once. Quietly. His commanding officer dismissed them and repeated the order. And here is the part of the story that matters: he obeyed anyway. Not because he had verified the order was sound, but because questioning it further felt like insubordination, like overstepping, like more trouble than it was worth. The mission failed exactly as he predicted. Men were lost. And in the aftermath, when asked why he hadn't pushed harder against an order he knew in his gut was flawed, he said something that should sit heavily with anyone who has ever silenced their own judgment to avoid friction. I told myself it wasn't my place to argue further. I told myself obeying was the safer choice. It wasn't the safer choice. It was simply the easier one in the moment, and the costliest one in the long run. This is the first obedience you need to eliminate, obeying authority over your own clear judgment, simply because authority is louder, more confident, or more socially comfortable to defer to. Epictetus taught his students that the question was never who holds power over you, the question was always whether that power has any legitimate claim over the part of you that reasons, judges, and chooses. A commanding officer can command your position on a battlefield. He cannot command what you know to be true. The moment you let him do that, the moment you silence your own clear-eyed assessment because disagreement feels risky, you have given away something far more valuable than compliance. You've given away your judgment itself. Marcus Aurelius, even as the most powerful man in the known world, surrounded by advisors who wanted him to simply nod along, wrote constantly about guarding this exact thing. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Reason, your own reason, exercised and trusted, was the one weapon he refused to surrender, no matter how many people around him expected obedience instead. Where in your life right now are you obeying a voice, a boss, a parent, a tradition, a crowd, over your own clear judgment, simply because disagreement feels uncomfortable? Find it. Name it. That is the first obedience to break. If this is already landing, go ahead and subscribe to Inner Steel right now, because this entire channel exists to help you find exactly these blind spots and dismantle them, one at a time. The man who wore chains he could have removed years ago. There's an old parable about a man who was once captured and chained in a small cell. The chains were heavy, the lock primitive, the door old and weak. For the first few days, he tested the chains constantly, searching for weakness, desperate for freedom. Eventually, he stopped testing them. He told himself the chains were unbreakable, the door impossible to force, the situation simply his permanent reality. Years passed. He built an entire identity around being a prisoner, adjusted his thinking, his habits, his sense of self entirely around the chains. One day, an earthquake shook the structure. The door, weak and ancient, swung open on its own. The man stared at the open door for a long moment, and didn't move. He had obeyed the idea of his imprisonment for so long that even with the door wide open, his mind couldn't process the freedom in front of him. It took another full day before he finally, hesitantly, walked out. This is the second obedience to eliminate, obeying old conclusions about yourself long after the conditions that created them have changed, or were never even true to begin with. You decided, at some point years ago, that you weren't capable of something. That you weren't the kind of person who does that. That your circumstances, your background, your past failures defined a permanent ceiling on what you could become. And you have obeyed that conclusion ever since, not because it's still true, not because you've tested it recently, but simply because you stopped questioning it so long ago that it calcified into identity. The Stoics called this kind of unexamined belief a great enemy of the rational mind. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And nowhere is this more true than in the stories we tell ourselves about our own limitations, stories that often outlive the circumstances that created them by years, sometimes decades. The door to your own cell may have swung open long ago. The question is whether you've kept obeying the chains out of habit, refusing to even glance toward the opening. Test your old conclusions about yourself. Not once, gently, aggressively, the way you test the chain you actually wanted to break. You might find, like the prisoner, that the door has been open longer than you ever let yourself imagine. The apprentice who painted only what his master approved. A young painter once apprenticed under a master artist renowned throughout the region. For years, he learned technique, composition, the disciplined fundamentals of his craft, invaluable lessons that shaped his skill enormously. But something else happened during those years. Every choice the apprentice made, every color, every subject, every stylistic decision, passed first through the filter of what would the master approve of. He stopped asking what he himself found beautiful, true, or worth painting. He simply painted what he predicted his master would praise. Years later, after the master had passed and the apprentice was free to paint anything he wished, he found himself paralyzed in front of a blank canvas. He realized, with a quiet horror, that he no longer knew what he actually wanted to paint. He had spent so many years obeying an external standard of approval that his own artistic voice, the thing that should have grown stronger under good mentorship, had instead atrophied from disuse. This is the third obedience to eliminate, obeying the anticipated approval of others so consistently that you lose access to your own preferences, instincts, and voice entirely. This shows up everywhere. The career path chosen because it would make parents proud, not because it reflects genuine purpose. The opinions softened or abandoned in conversation because disagreement might generate disapproval. The life decisions filtered constantly through an invisible audience. What would they think? What would they say? Would this be approved of? Until the person making the decisions can no longer distinguish their own desires from the anticipated reactions of everyone around them. The Stoics drew a sharp line between living for internal validation, alignment with your own reasoned values, and living for external validation, the opinions and approval of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote with real urgency about this exact trap. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Notice, be one, according to your own reasoned understanding of goodness, not according to an endless committee of external opinions you've spent your life trying to satisfy. You do not need permission to want what you want. You do not need approval to value what you value. The apprentice's master is gone now. Whoever yours is, ask yourself honestly whether you're still painting for an audience that may not even be paying attention anymore, while your own voice sits quietly underneath, waiting to be used again. If you're starting to see your own life in these stories, that's exactly the point of this channel. Subscribe to Inner Steel, because every video here is built to help you locate exactly this kind of invisible obedience, and finally put it down. The villagers who followed a path no one remembered creating. In an old village, there was a worn dirt path that wound around a hill rather than going straight through it. Every villager used this path daily, for generations, without question. It was simply the way things were done. One day, a visiting traveler asked why the path curved so dramatically around the hill instead of cutting directly through, which would have saved considerable time and effort for everyone who walked it daily. No villager could answer. They asked the elders. The elders didn't know either, only that the path had always gone that way, that their parents had walked it, and their parents before them. Eventually, someone discovered an old record. Generations earlier, a fallen tree had blocked the direct route, forcing everyone to detour around the hill. The tree had been cleared away nearly 100 years prior. The obstacle had been gone for a century. And an entire village had continued obeying a detour built around a problem that no longer existed, simply because no one had ever stopped to ask why the path was shaped the way it was. This is the fourth obedience to eliminate: obeying inherited routines, traditions, and the way things are done, without ever examining whether the original reason still applies. Every family, every culture, every workplace carries inherited paths like this, habits and rules that made sense once, shaped by circumstances long since resolved, but obeyed indefinitely simply because no one questions them. The career advice from a relative shaped by an economy that no longer exists. The relationship pattern inherited from parents, obeyed without ever asking whether it actually serves you. The belief about money, about masculinity, about what a successful life looks like, inherited, unquestioned, obeyed as though it were law rather than simply one fallen tree, cleared away long ago, that nobody bothered to check on. The Stoics were relentless examiners of inherited assumption. Epictetus instructed his students to test every single belief rigorously, regardless of its source. No man is free who is not master of himself. And no man is master of himself while obeying paths whose original purpose he has never even bothered to investigate. Walk your own inherited paths today. Ask honestly of every routine, every rule, every "this is just how it's done" in your life: is the fallen tree still there? Or have you simply never checked? The sailor who trusted the storm more than the compass. There's a maritime account of a young sailor on his first major voyage, caught in a violent storm far from shore. Panic spread quickly through the crew. Waves crashed over the deck, visibility collapsed entirely, and every instinct screamed at the sailor to simply react, to grab whatever felt safest in the moment, to follow the chaos of the storm rather than any deliberate plan. An older crew member grabbed his arm and pointed him toward the compass mounted near the helm. "The storm will tell you to go anywhere," he shouted over the wind. "It doesn't care where you end up. The compass doesn't care about the storm at all. Obey the compass, not the chaos." The sailor forced himself, against every panicked instinct, to keep referencing the compass rather than reacting purely to the storm's chaos. The ship, battered but intact, eventually found its way back to a safe heading. This is the fifth and final obedience this video will name, and arguably the most urgent one in the world we live in today: obeying the chaos of immediate emotional reaction rather than the steady compass of your own deliberately chosen values. Every single day, the modern world generates storms designed specifically to provoke immediate reaction. Outrage engineered for clicks. Manufactured urgency demanding instant response. Algorithms calibrated precisely to your emotional triggers, all competing for the same thing: your reflexive obedience to whatever feeling has just been activated in you. And most people obey it completely. They react instantly, emotionally, without ever checking the compass of their own actual values first. They argue with strangers who were never trying to have a real conversation. They make decisions in anger that calm reflection would have prevented entirely. They let the loudest, most chaotic voice of the moment dictate their next action, over and over, storm after storm, never once consulting the steady instrument that was built specifically to guide them through exactly this kind of chaos. Marcus Aurelius, ruling during constant political storms, wrote the reminder to himself that every person needs today. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The storm does not care where you end up. It was never trying to guide you anywhere. Only your own deliberately examined values, your compass, built carefully over years of reflection, actually has your direction in mind. The next time a storm rises, an argument, an outrage, a provocation engineered to produce instant reaction. Resist the pull to simply obey the chaos. Find your compass first. Then move. Closing. 5 obediences. Each one quiet, each one invisible, each one running your life far more than you ever fully realized until this very video named them out loud. Obedience to authority over your own clear judgment. Obedience to old conclusions about yourself that the world has long since outgrown. Obedience to anticipated approval instead of your own genuine voice. Obedience to inherited paths built around obstacles that vanished generations ago. Obedience to the chaos of immediate reaction instead of the steady compass of your own values. None of these obediences announced themselves clearly. None of them asked your permission. They simply accumulated, year after year, until they felt indistinguishable from your own personality, until obeying became so automatic you forgot it was ever a choice at all. The Stoics did not build their philosophy to make men more compliant. They built it to make men free, genuinely, deliberately free, masters of their own reasoning, answerable first and always to their own carefully examined judgment rather than to every voice, tradition, or storm demanding automatic obedience. You do not need permission to stop obeying what was never actually earning your obedience in the first place. Start today. Find one obedience from this video that lives quietly inside your own life. Question it properly, the way the Stoics would have. And when you find that the chain was weaker than you thought, the door already open, the fallen tree long since cleared away, walk through. This is Inner Steel. If this video gave you something real today, subscribe for more, because we are only just getting started, and we will see you in the next one. Copyright Inner Steel YouTube channel. Word count 5000 plus words. Sections 5 points plus opening plus close. Subscribe mentions woven naturally into the narration. 3.